We're always looking for people to come and share their stories with us. And Mary Jo had heard Sarah speak last year, or the year before, and was really impressed with what she had to say. I'll not try to tell you Sarah's story. She will tell you her story. You may have seen her on TV. She's been on the Ellen DeGeneres show and other things. And so she's been in fact, you were in Europe here a while back, right? And in Spain. So she has been, she's a very popular person. And she wants to share her story with us. And afterwards, I'm sure you will have lots of questions. Sarah Sherman, welcome.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me come tonight. Harry contacted me, seems like months ago, about speaking, so it's been on my calendar and on my mind for quite some time. So, like he mentioned, my name is Sarah Sherman. I'm now 31 years old, born and raised in South Fort Worth, and I never really know how to start this, and I'm always nervous, so we're just gonna go for it. But basically, I was born with hearing loss, and I was 18 months old before my parents discovered it. I was attending daycare, and the daycare worker mentioned it to my mother that, you know, maybe I had some hearing loss, that I kind of had issues with paying attention or listening, focusing, and my mother said, well, you know, we just thought she's going through the terrible twos a little early. And so the lady said, well, I think maybe you should go ahead and have her tested. So Mom took me to the doctor, got me into specialists, and that began the long journey of my life. But they did determine that I did have hearing loss, and I was fitted with hearing aids around the age of 2. Very young to be fitted with hearing aids. And I started attending deaf ed school in Crowley. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Crowley, but there's a school called Deer Creek Elementary, and back when I was 2 years old, they had a deaf ed program. And so I attended deaf ed with other children who had hearing aids, cochlear implants, kids who had none. And so we were in a special program separated from the public school system. And I went there until I was 5 years old and deemed fit to attend public school. And there at the deaf ed school, I did learn sign language. They teach you sign language. They teach you to read lips. You're working with a teacher, you know, day in and day out, and they teach you to pay attention to the way people's mouths move, their tongue placement, their teeth placement, watching the rise and fall of a chest, watching someone's body language. There's all these factors that go into play with learning to adapt and try to get by and listen and have a conversation with someone. And so went through deaf ed school, entered public school, and continued with speech therapy and speech classes and things like that. And there in public school, just pretty much lost all knowledge of sign language. My parents hadn't learned it. No one at the public school knew it. And, you know, you don't use it, you lose it. So I got by for the remainder of years by lip reading and just intently focusing and paying attention to people. So that was pretty much, you know, from kindergarten till high school, that was how I got by. It is hard. I learned a smile gets you a long way. And, you know, if you just smile and look, you know, at least they just, you know, I jokingly said, it sounds harsh, but I jokingly said, worst case scenario, they just think I'm dumb, but at least I'm nice, you know. So, and over the years, I would get fitted with new hearing aids. I've had in the ear, I've had behind the ear, and as I got older, my audiologist was like, you really need to go back to the behind the ear technology. Your hearing loss is too great to be wearing the in the ear hearing aids. He said, you know, and obviously it was at a time in my life where I was vain and I was working hard to keep my ears covered with my hair, and here he goes and tells me I need the big behind the ear hearing aids. I sucked it up, I did it, and realized they do work better. And so, age of 17, I met my husband, Sloan. We got married, and I'm giving you the short snippet to get to the good meat of the subject. But we got married, and we just formed a routine. He automatically just melded in, and he was my sidekick, my interpreter, and was with me anytime there was a situation where, you know, I felt that as though I needed help, or if I was at a family function or at a dinner, or there's so many things people don't think about, but just everyday interactions, going to pay a bill somewhere and having to interact with someone, things that are important, that information is, needed, and you don't want to mess up on anything. So he became my sidekick. I jokingly have called him my pit bull or my bodyguard because he was always at my side there to help. And so, that was how I lived. I made the best of what I had and formed a routine, and whether it was my personality or whatnot, I just never was down and out about it. I was an only child, extremely nosy, outgoing. I loved to read, and so I was just around adults mostly. So, all these factors go into play with just being able to thrive well in my situation, which not everyone does. So, shortly after Sloan and I got married, I decided and we decided together, I wanted to figure out what the root cause of my hearing loss was. My mother had been told that because she had a fever and had a virus when I was born with high fever, and the doctors just attributed my hearing loss to medication. And so for whatever reason, my parents just accepted that answer, and that was what I grew up believing, that my hearing loss was just due to medication and being so sick when I was born. So Sloan and I decided to go get into a specialist to see if we could figure out what the actual issue was. And we ended up going to Baylor in Dallas, where I underwent several scans and testing and saw a doctor. And the doctor determined that I actually was missing the hairs in my inner ear. And the hairs are what pick up the sound waves and send them to the brain. So he said it was just a genetic abnormality, just a fluke chance. My parents' DNA together caused the issue. It was not due to medication. It was not hereditary. It was just how God made me, basically. And growing up, that was what my dad had always told me, My dad was bald from the age of 20, and my mother always wore glasses. So he would always say, God made me bald. Your mom has to wear glasses. You just have hearing aids. It's just how you're made. It's how you're unique. So we discovered the root of the hearing loss, and I actually had 85 bilateral decibel loss, which another audiologist had given the example that a chainsaw running at full throttle is about 85 decibels. So prior to the implants and prior to with no hearing aids, it would take a chainsaw running at full throttle for me to be able to register some sound. And on top of that, just because you could register the sound, you have no clue where the sound's coming from or what the sound is. So people often ask, well, what did hearing aids do for you? And I noticed a couple of y'all have hearing aids, so you understand. But all hearing aids do is just amplify every noise. There's no distinction between any noises. It just amplifies everything. And so it's basically making you more aware that there's a noise, but you're doing all the work to look and find where the noise is. Is it a person talking? Is it a dog clapping? Is it a dog barking? Or is someone clapping trying to get my attention? Things of that nature. So back to the doctor at Baylor, he said, there's something coming down the pipeline, and about within 10 years' time, there will be a type of surgery or implant that you'll benefit from. And so whether it was God's blessing or, once again, my personality, I just left the doctor's office that day, just, assuming that before I died, there would be something, science and technology would have something that I could benefit from. And until then, I was just going to go about my merry way, pretty much. Sounds cliche, but that's how it went. So we, several years after that, Sloan and I actually had a moment in our lives where we uprooted everything, sold everything, quit our jobs, sold our cars, and we moved to China. We went over there for missionary work, but of course you can't get into China as a missionary. They won't let you in. So we were hired by a company out of California, and Sloan taught English at a university over there. So we spent a year over in China, and it was, as much as it was a good opportunity, there was a lot of bad, but there's two sides to every coin, so no matter where you go, there's going to be the good and the bad. But for me personally, Mandarin is an extremely hard language to learn for the average person. So it's all tonal. It's based on how you say something. I can say hello here in America 5 different ways in different tones, and it still means hello. Over there, you say something slightly tonally different, and it means something completely different. So I pretty much just gave up on trying to be fluent in Mandarin. And that, among other reasons, we lived out in a small village that had no running water or heat. We had it on campus because we were foreigners, but just to give you an idea, it was a small village. They had never seen white people, so we're pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. It was a great year for many reasons. It stretched us in many ways, but being so far away from home, anytime something did go wrong, it just depressed you and you just got down and out, because you're already so far away from home and all your support group. And so here I am, Sloan's the only person I know there. And throughout my life, for whatever reason, scientists and doctors have never been able to explain it, but if I hit my head a certain way, I would lose my hearing. And the doctors to this day, have no idea what causes it or why it happens, but if I hit my head hard enough in a certain spot, I would lose my hearing. And for whatever reason, there was a certain type of steroid that they would give me that would bring the hearing back. So while I'm in China, this happens. I don't remember how I hit my head, but I bump my head, I lose my hearing, and I am utterly distraught because I am on the other side of the world. I have no access to my audiologist. I have no access to doctors. I don't know how I can get the medication or if I can even get the medication. And so I remember we would call and talk with family back home, and I can remember my father-in-law got on the phone one day and he said, I just want you to cling to the scripture, Hebrews 10:23. He who promised is faithful. And so I think within a day or two, my hearing actually came back, and that was the first time in my entire life that it had happened on its own without medication. And so, at the time I thought, well, that's what that scripture is referencing, like God promises to restore, he promises, all these things that throughout my life, and I thought, okay, this is what we're talking about. He's restored my hearing. I'm good. And I should add that prior to this and throughout the years prior, I had received several words from people, and people had prayed over me that my hearing would be restored. And so at that particular moment, I fleshly thought, that's what the word is for. That's what the scripture is for. My hearing has been restored, without medication. But I'm looking at my notes here. You'll have to forgive me. And so after we were in China for a year, and when we came home, that scripture has just resonated and been a common theme throughout my journey. It's been useful in many areas, and I've commonly referred back to that scripture. And so that was we returned home back in 2007. I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. We had her, and we were currently working on restoring and redoing an old farmhouse on the place that my parents-in-law had given us. And so we were working on that. My husband was trying to get a job. He was certified, had taught English in China at a university, and we come home and he can't get a job to save his life. He can't get a teaching job anywhere. And coincidentally, that was at the time that the market just fell for all the teachers. There were layoffs. You couldn't get a job teaching unless you taught math or special ed. Seemed like that was all that was available. And he spent 2 years, I'm looking at him, 2 years, just trying everywhere he could. And it was even like going to uproot us and move us to Brownsville or to El Paso, places that I had no desire to go just to try to get a teaching job, and it just wasn't working. And that started it sounds such Debbie Downer, but the despair for us started then. He couldn't get a job. I was pregnant. We had our daughter. There were just a lot of hardships. We lost all our dogs between my family, between my household, and then my parents-in-law live on the place with us. Between all of us, we lost all our dogs on the place. They were all killed within a year's time. We had lost cattle, we lost horses, tractors were breaking down, trucks were breaking down, hay caught on fire. There were just so many things that seemed to be going wrong. We were in a drought, literally and figuratively. We were losing family members. I had lost a baby. There were just so many things that were going wrong. And then January of 2010, my grandfather, who lived on the place with us as well, grandfather-in-law passed away unexpectedly on a Tuesday or Wednesday. We buried him on a Saturday, and that following Tuesday, my father-in-law passed away unexpectedly, buried him on a Saturday. So my mother-in-law buried her dad and her husband within a week's time, both together unexpectedly. So that was just a real kick in the teeth and just added to everything. And so here's my husband, who still hasn't been able to find a teaching job, but went and worked for a friend at a car repair place, just for some income, and was still working on the house. So here he is left. He's an only child. So here his father's passed away, his grandfather's passed away, his mom's left with this we live on a place, 30-something acres, and so, people don't realize all the work that's involved in that between the cattle and the horses, and I mean, there's always something that needs to be done. There's a tree that has fallen, there's a fence that's busted, there's calves that need doctoring, there's just so many things. And so all these things are just piling on, and I mean, my poor mother-in-law and my husband are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. He's just ready to burn it all and go back to China, frankly. My mother-in-law said, I'm right there with you. I have nothing here, And it's just a really hard and down and out time. And at this time, I'm currently pregnant with our second daughter. So my father-in-law passes away 3 weeks before she's born. So I have my timeline here because it's all running together after a while. And so it was during that time that I heard a message at church, and someone mentioned if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. And I was thinking to myself, this is true, but he never promised that it would be easy or that it would happen on your timeline or how you thought it would happen. And, whether we learn that when we're 20 or when we're 82, it's all a lesson we have to learn. And I've often said that I get frustrated because so many people make the cliche comment, God will never give you more than you can handle. And I have to work hard not to scream from the rooftops. He will give you more than you can handle. May not do it to everyone, but he'll also provide you with the tools and the ability to overcome, and he'll surround you with people to help you out of that. And I remember one time, I can't remember if Larry said it or someone else said it, that, it's in those times that it'll provide you with the tools to get through these hard times, and then it's in those times that as long as you still honor him and look to him, you'll get through it. And so I often say our family's proof of that. And so we still knew during this time that God did have a plan for us, and that, that there was green grass on the other side and we would get through it. We just had to hold fast, basically. And that became a common theme at that point in our lives, too, was holding fast. And then back in May of 2011, Sloan's driving down the road going somewhere and listening to Rush Limbaugh. And here's a radio ad for something called the Esteem Hearing Implant. Listens to the ad, promptly gets a hold of me and says, go to the computer and Google this. This is the thing you've been waiting for. He said, I heard it on the radio, go to the computer, Google all the information you can on it. So I do, I go to the computer and I begin, furiously researching, trying to get all the info I can. I request an information packet, I've got a DVD coming to me, and I see at the bottom there's a number you can call, and it says, basically, I don't remember how they worded it, but basically we deal with hard of hearing and deaf people, call us, we will get someone on the phone that's loud and clear, and we'll work it out. So I call and I speak with the lady, and I'm asking her a million questions, and just I can't even contain myself. I'm so excited. And through the course of conversation, we get to the point where she tells me it's a $30,000 procedure and insurance doesn't cover it. And so I'm just heartbroken. And I start bawling on the phone with this complete stranger, and I say, ma'am, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I appreciate it, but I'm not going to waste any more of your time. So I hang up the phone with her. I call Sloan back. I tell him, and he's like, who cares? He's like, call her back and get the information you need. He's like, don't freak out, Just call her back and get the rest of your questions answered. So I hang up. I call the lady back again. We're talking again, and I'm asking her more questions. And through the course of discussing stuff, she mentioned something, and I realized that it's not just $30,000. It's $30,000 per ear. So you're looking at $60,000 to get both ears done. And I mean, who only wants one done? You want one, you want both. It's just being honest. So I start crying again on the phone, and I hang up with her, and I call Sloan back, and I'm bawling, and I'm like, in my eyes, she may as well have said $60 million. That's how unobtainable it was for me. And Sloan said, hon, I don't know why you're so upset. $30,000 was so out of reach. What's $30,000 more? He's like, don't worry about it. He said, I'll sell a kidney, I'll join the army, I'll sell the house, I'll do whatever to make this happen. And where most people think, they laugh and think, oh, that's cute that he said that. But my problem is, and my mother-in-law's problem is, we knew he was serious. And I was only okay with one of those options. I liked my house, and I didn't want him joining the army. I didn't care if he sold a kidney, but it still didn't, And so several days passed between this phone call, and Sloan's like, we're just gonna pray about it, and we're gonna sit down and try to figure out if there's something we can do, some way we can make this happen. We'll scrape and we'll scrounge, and even if it takes 5 years to save up the money, we'll get it done. And so honestly, it was probably the most depressed I've ever been in my life, and I'm not a down and out person. I'm sad for a little bit, but then I bounce back. There's just too much to be happy about. And so it was probably the hardest few days of my life. It was just awful knowing that there was something right there within my reach that I've wanted forever and I can't have it. And so Larry comes to us one day and she's like, guys, my mother-in-law, she's like, I've been praying about this and thinking about this, and I really just feel led to cash out my retirement savings. She said, I can only afford one ear, but one's better than nothing. And, let's do it. And so people would often ask, oh my gosh, how do you, what do you say to something like that? And number one, me knowing her so well, I knew that she wouldn't dare offer up something without giving it much thought and prayer, and she wouldn't do something unless she was completely sure that she should do it. So, part of me wanted to take the money and run, part of me wanted to tell her no, but obviously I took the money. And so I call the company, I get the first appointment they can. They have to do CT scans to make sure that everything is structurally okay in my ear and that I'm a candidate for the surgery. Get past all that. First surgery date they have is August in 2011. And it was several weeks from the time I talked to him till the first surgery date. So August comes and I have the surgery done, and it was 9.5 hours. I'm under anesthesia, and they say it's a typical 3 to 5 hour surgery. But due to the makeup of my ear canal and the way my eardrum works, everything was too small. It didn't work like a typical person's eardrum. These are all layman's terms because I'm not technical. But basically, they had a hard time. And then what they do is they cut here and they grind out a portion of your skull and they cement a processor to your skull. And then they cut behind your ear and drill down, and they run 2 wires that have drivers on them, and they attach those to 2 different bones in your ear. So once they get everything in place, they turn the device on to make sure it works before they close you up. Well, when they turned the device on, they realized my eardrum did not work like a typical person's eardrum. So they had to remove it, reconfigure the algorithm, and then put it back in. So that's the only reason my surgery took so long. Mind you, I have only had a tonsillectomy, and you're under for like 20 minutes, if that. I had absolutely no idea that you're skirting along the edge of death and that it would just be awful when you wake up. And the doctor told me, or my husband or somebody was mentioning, even people who have triple bypasses aren't under that long. It was a horrible experience waking up and coming out of it. I can't even begin to tell you the sheer horror and the terror I felt upon waking up. And I can't express what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. So Sloan finally, after it goes on and on, he finally realizes I'm panicking, and he's like, it's okay, it's the anesthesia. You're not dying, it's the anesthesia. But I did wake up immediately, and I remembered immediately that as I was laying in surgery on the bed, that Jesus sat beside my bed in a chair, wearing all white with his hands in his lap. And he never looked at me. He looked straight ahead, and he didn't speak, but it was a sense of peace. And then standing up by my head was my father-in-law. And in life, when he would stand around and talk, he had a way of hooking his fingers into his jeans. And he stood at my bedside, had his fingers tucked into his jeans. And obviously, I realized it wasn't him, but I like to believe it's just an angel or just God's way of giving me peace. It was just such a sense of peace. But when I woke up, Sloan said that's all I would talk about, and I'm screaming because I can't hear myself, and the anesthesia, and I'm just discombobulated, and all I'm talking about is Jesus and Ross, and don't let me forget that Jesus was by my bedside. And the poor anesthesiologist was at the foot of my bed sitting at her desk doing something, and he said, and she's looking at me, and whether it was my drugged up state and I just think she's giving me weird looks or whether she actually was, but I lifted my hand up and Sloan said, I said, she doesn't believe me. And he said the lady got up and laughed. And so but until the day I die, I'll never forget that vision of the sense of peace I had and comfort. So anyway, I don't even know, that's not even anything to do with the story, but I just want to tell y'all that tidbit. So I had the surgery done, and once they do the surgery, they don't turn the device on. They make you wait 8 weeks because they want the fluid to drain out of your ear. They want everything to be healed and all that to be good before they even turn the device on. So you want to talk about the longest 8 weeks of my life. We went from the most depressed few days I've ever had to the worst surgery I've ever had to 8 long weeks of my life. And so the first couple of weeks went okay, but towards the end it was just awful. And the best way I've thought to describe it is if someone handed you an eye patch and told you you had to do this for 8 weeks. You're straining everything out of that one eye. You're mentally exhausted easy. You're physically exhausted easy. You just don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to participate in anything, and you get grumpy. And so it was a really hard 8 weeks. And on top of that, I'm wondering the whole time what this device is going to be like. Is it going to work? Am I going to like it? There's all these questions running through your mind. And so, I'm going to make sure I don't skip out on anything. Shortly before the 8 weeks was up and it was time for me to be activated, they call it activating it, my mother-in-law was like, guys, I just want to get away. You know, I'm having a hard time. I just want to go visit my good friend in Nashville, Tennessee. She's like, I'm going to fly and go visit Sandy and I'll be back. She just went for a few days. And so she told me upon returning, or told us, she said she was on the airplane coming back home. And I could be butchering this, but the gist of it's all y'all need to know. But she's on the plane and they're up in the clouds and it's during a thunderstorm. And she's got a window seat. And she says she was just having quiet time with God and just conversating in her head and just, you know, thinking about everything that had gone on. She was down and out. She was trying her best, like I said, to just hang on by the skin of her teeth and try to be positive. And so she said she's sitting and she's watching the thunderstorm through the window and it's lightning and it's raining. And she said, you know, part of her was terrified because you're up there with this. You're right there by the lightning. You're in the clouds. You're on this plane. I think it was nighttime. And then another part of her was like, this is awesome. You know, like I am right here with the action. This is really cool. And so she said she was just talking with God and she was just going over, you know, all of the things that she was having a hard time about. And she said she was like, you know, God, if you were to ask me in this moment right here what I want, she said, we need something miraculous. We need something magnificent. She's like, we've just been kicked down so many times and everything just seems to not go right, and one thing after another is happening and going wrong. She's like, if you were to ask me right now, she's like, I want something magnificent right now to happen. You know, some silver lining behind the clouds. She said, you know, I've asked you other times in my life, you didn't answer my quote unquote wishes when Ross died or when other things went wrong, and I've continued to love and serve you, and I will continue to love and serve you all the days of my life. But if you were to ask me right now in this moment, we need something magnificent. We need a turnaround. And that was a couple of days before the implant, I went down and had my implant activated. And the closest service center is in the Woodlands area near Houston, 3.5-hour car ride. And so originally we were all going to load up and go, me, her, Sloan, and the kids. She decided, or the night before, she said, you know, guys, I've been thinking about this, and I don't think it'll be a good idea to have the kids in the back seat. You know, you're already going to be so overwhelmed. They're going to be asking a million questions. It's a long car ride. Why don't I just stay here with the girls and you and Sloan go? Okay, sounds like a pretty good idea. It's probably a good idea. So that's what we planned to do. The next morning, we dropped the girls off, and we're getting ready to leave, and she stopped Sloan, and she says, here's my camera. Film her. I want to see her reaction. You know, basically, I paid for this. I'm going to see the good. And Sloan will be the first to tell you he hates being in charge of a camera. He hates getting his picture taken. He doesn't want to take any pictures. And he's the first to say, if it hadn't been my mama, I wouldn't have done it. So he took the camera. We drive down to Houston. And it's a computer mapping program. So I sit down. They hook me up to computers. And they're doing their end of it on the computer before they get everything set to turn the device on. And so literally right at the moment that she's starting to do stuff, Sloan underhandedly turns the camera on to film it. She turns it on, and I hear her say, it's on, something to that effect, and I realize I can hear her, and then the remote is being set down on the counter. I hear the clacking of the remote being set down, which kind of gets me gasping, and then I realize I can hear myself gasping. So I go to swallow, and that sounds really loud. I'm hearing all my internal noises. I'm starting to whimper and cry. I hear that, which makes it worse. Then I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable. Then the laughter's loud, so that makes me laugh louder. It was just this huge jumble of emotions all built into one, and a huge sense of relief, because this whole time, the two fears I had were if it doesn't work or if I don't like it. Because my whole life, every time I've ever gotten new hearing aids, I hated them. It took at least 6 months. Even though they were better technology and they helped me, it was still changing what I knew every day. It was still changing the sense of comfort I had. I knew every day what it was going to be like, how sounds were going to be. I knew how I was going to have to interact, how I was going to have to deal. But every time you get hearing aids, it just threw a wrench in the machine because everything was new and I had to reacclimate all over again. And this was like times 10, compared to getting new hearing aids. And the doctors are explaining, your brain's going to be firing in ways it's never fired before. There's going to be so much to get used to, so much acclimation. Don't freak out if it sounds bad or weird in the beginning. So they turned the device on, and I realized right away I like it. And it was worth every bit of blood, sweat, and tears and money and everything. It was worth it up to that point. And so he films 90 seconds of film, puts the camera down, And all of the people in the room were like, say something to her, Sloan. So Sloan puts his hand up, because didn't want me reading his lips, obviously, puts his hand up, and everyone in the room's expecting him to say, I love you, or something cliche, and instead he says, do you want a cucumber sandwich? And I answered him, and everyone in the room, like he and I are like having this loving moment, and everyone else in the room is like, what the heck? That's not, like he didn't say anything sweet, and she's totally okay with it. And so we quickly had to explain, well, if he had said, I love you, I would have known, because just from the way his eyes move, or the way, just when you've seen the same phrase over and over, you know. So he said, man, it was just off the cuff. It was the first original thing I could think of. That's what I said. So we head home after getting it turned on, making sure I'm on track. We head home, and by the time we got home, it was late that evening. And of course, friends and family knew I was going down there, and they were waiting for me to get home, and they were waiting for me to post on Facebook all about it and post the video and things like that. So I'm trying to post a video on Facebook, and the file is too big. It's not letting me do it. I'm not computer savvy at all. So I'm up, at this point it's like 11:30 at night, and I'm messaging with people, you got any tips for me? How do I do this? And someone says, well, why don't you just upload the video to YouTube and attach the YouTube link to your Facebook page? And I thought, well, that sounds easy enough. So I do that. It takes YouTube an hour and 45 minutes to upload for 90 seconds of film, which I'm told is unheard of. For whatever reason, it took that long. It uploads, I attach it, shut the computer down, go to bed. By this time, it's early Tuesday morning. Wake up after going to bed, get on my computer, see all the well wishes from friends and family, and congrats and all those things, shut the computer down, don't think anything of it. By Thursday, a friend calls me or messages me or something. I don't even remember what friend, but I just remember they were like, dude, have you gone to YouTube? You have like 200,000 hits. And I'm like, are you serious? I couldn't wrap my mind around 200,000 people, and I'm freaking out, and I'm telling Sloan, why do people go to YouTube and type in, girl crying after she hears herself? And he said, they're not typing that in. He said one person saw it, sent it to their friends, who sent it to their coworkers, who sent it to their family, and it's just snowballed from there. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. 200,000 people. I'd have done my hair better. I'd have worn nicer clothes. I'd have smiled. We'd have made a longer video. I mean, there are all these what ifs and shouldas. And so that was Thursday. By Friday morning, my phone rings. I get a phone call. It's so-and-so, the CEO of the company who makes the implant, and he's going through his little spiel, explaining who he is, and I panic. So I butt in, and I say, I am so sorry, sir. It was never intended to go on YouTube. I had no idea that 200,000 people would see it, and I'm explaining how it ended up on YouTube. And he stops me, and he says, no, Miss Sherman. He said, that's fine. He said, not a problem. But the Today Show is trying to get a hold of you because your video went viral. I didn't even know what going viral meant. After I hung up the phone with him, I had to Google because I wasn't sure. And he said, it's going to hit 1 million views. Within 24 hours, you'll be at 1 million views. Is it okay if we give the Today Show your info? I need to call you back. I can't even think right now. My husband's down at the barn. I will call you back, sir. Hang up the phone, throw the kids in the truck, drive down to the barn. Don't even think I put it in park. Jump out of the truck, and I'm yelling to Sloan, the video went viral. The Today Show is trying to get a hold of us. What? And so I slow down, I calm down, I explain everything to him, and he goes, well, let's call the man back. What's his number and what's his name? I have no idea. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for cell phones, and I can just go, oh, this is the number he called from. We'll call him back and just play nice, because I don't even remember the fella's name. So calls him back. The Today Show ends up getting a hold of us, and it was the weekend before my 29th birthday, oddly enough. So they say, we want to fly you and your husband out, and we'll give you a couple extra days to spend your birthday in New York. So mad rush. My mother-in-law's handing Sloan money. You have to go get your hair cut. You're representing me on TV. You need to get your jeans. You need to get your jeans starched, Sarah. You need your hair done. You need to go buy a new shirt. The Beverly Hillbillies are heading to, and so I've never been anywhere north of like the Mason-Dixon. So sending me to New York was like Ellie Mae goes to New York, no lie. So we go to the Today Show. I meet Matt Lauer, have the interview, and while we're in New York for the Today Show, I get a phone call. It's the producer from the Ellen Show on the other coast. asking if they can fly us directly from New York to there on a red eye that evening. And I say, you know, sir, I've already promised my kids that I'm coming home tonight. You know, my little girls, I've never been away from them this long. They think I'm coming home tonight. So my only stipulation is that I can at least slide into the airport and grab them and head to you. You have to pack my kids with me. So he says, okay, we'll do that. So we hop on a plane to go home. And I should mention that before we get on the plane, they do pre-phone interviews. So they kind of formulate what questions they're going to do, and they get your story. And so the man's talking to me, and he says, is there anyone you would like to thank, you know, or anything, any person you would like to show gratitude to while you're on the show? And I said, yes, my mother-in-law. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. And I just proceeded to explain, you know, why I owed everything to her, and what an awesome person she was. She has pretty hair, she has pretty eyes, and I apparently did a bang-up job, because by the time we landed and she picked us up at the airport, she's grinning like the Cheshire cat, and she's like, guess what, guys? They're flying me with y'all to the Ellen show. And so when I was on the phone with them, after I tell the story, he says, our office is in tears. We will be sure to hook her up with some nice swag while you're on the show. We'll give you some swag for her. So I'm thinking, yay, not only does she get swag, they get to present it to her while she's there. I'm thinking a new purse, a day at the spa, you know, something like this. So I'm excited and can barely contain myself with the secret. So we pick her and the girls up, we fly to the Ellen show, and they're drilling us with questions on how the interview is going to go. You know, it's a very tight-knit run show, everything down to a T. They have it all planned. We're getting hair and makeup, clothes, you know. They're going over each of us separately. You know, this is kind of what Ellen's going to ask. This is kind of how we want you to answer it. You're going to have this amount of time. Look here, smile there. And so I'm a nervous wreck, number one, because I'm going on live TV. I've never even watched the Ellen show. And we don't have cable. No lie, we don't have cable. And so I'm nervous as all get out. And so I get on the stage, I meet Ellen, I hug her neck, I'm deer in headlights, and she starts talking, and she is not following the script they have given me, which only adds to the nervousness. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And prior to that, they were like, Ellen is a big animal activist person. Do not mention that you raise beef cows. Do not mention that y'all rope. Don't mention that you've ever even hurt an animal, any form or fashion. And so all I can think about are these things they've told me not to mention, and she's not following script, so I'm nervous. Well, anyways, as it goes on, she pans to my husband and my mother-in-law in the audience and says, you know, explains the part where Larry cashed out her savings to pay for it, and she makes the statement. And I don't think it's right that a family should have to struggle like that. And as soon as she said that, I knew something was up. And she whips out this big check that was covered up next to her for a check made out to $30,000 to me to pay Larry back for cashing her savings out. So, on top of that, Envoy Medical, the maker of the implant, has also agreed to do my other ear for free for all the publicity has garnered them. So within 24 hours' time, I've gotten $60,000 worth of medical technology that I've waited my whole life for. My mother-in-law's been paid back. She was trusting in God to just do what she felt like, you know, she had peace about. Just cash it out and do it, you know, you'll take care of me. And so back to the thing on the airplane about us needing something magnificent. She has Larry and Sloan come to the stage. We're just like crying and, oh my goodness, we can't believe it. And, you know, we're thinking, this is our magnificent. This is it. Thank you, God. You know, this is our silver lining. This turns everything around. This was worth it, you know.
This is what it looks like when a 29-year-old woman hears her own voice and laughter for the first time in her life.
There you go. It's beeping. So now technically your device is on. Can you tell? Oh, that's exciting! Or you can put it down for a second. Just get used to the sound. What does it sound like? You know, I'm hearing myself cry. Can you hear me?
Wow, from Johnson County, Texas, please welcome Sarah Sherman. Is all this really loud right now?
Amazingly.
Yeah, because I would imagine that all of a sudden everything must be, the smallest thing must be really loud.
Yes.
Yeah, and first of all, that was the most moving thing that I've ever seen. So to experience that, this is just a week old, right?
Yes, ma'am. 8 days.
8 days. And so explain to me what it is. You were born with, what is it exactly?
It's just a DNA, my parents' DNA together caused the hairs in my middle ear not to form, and those hairs are what transmit the sound waves to your brain. So.
Wow, it's just that simple, just not having the hairs in your ear, and that's incredible.
Yes.
Incredible. Okay, so I don't understand how clearly you're speaking. I mean, you sound like usually there's a little bit of a speech impediment because you don't hear clearly how words are pronounced. How are you speaking so clearly?
I get asked that all the time. Honestly, I just accredit it to deaf ed school, speech therapy, and I'm a big talker, just like to talk a lot. I love to read. I mean, I just read anything I can get my hands on. I have a passion for English and grammar, and always excelled in those subjects, oddly enough. So other than that, just...
And when you, by the way, if you want to read a book, this is a good one.
I started. I'm
Okay, thank you. So what, other than obviously your children, you have, how old are your children?
My oldest will be 4 next month, and my youngest is 20 months old.
And so you're hearing them for the first time.
Hearing, yeah,
And-
their voices, yeah.
Right, and that must have been obviously something you would, be waiting to hear what that sounds like. Your husband, of course, Sloan. But what other sounds did you imagine? What sounds did you think about, like music even?
Hearing music clearly, the rain, thunder, birds. I mean, things that normal people wouldn't think about hearing, but like my husband snoring or, yourself laughing, just things like that.
Speaking of your husband, Sloan, hi, how are you?
I'm well.
This is incredible. This is and now she knows you snore. You got away with it for years, but you snore.
Yeah, but I think she only experienced it one time and then turned it off.
I see. Yeah.
She's not going to be subject to
Yeah.
it.
And, well, you probably love hearing him snore. It's going to wear off, but right now.
Oh, it already wore off the first night.
I see. And then this is Sloan's mother, your mother-in-law, Larry, right? Sitting next. And Larry, I think, has to be the best mother-in-law that I've ever heard of. The procedure cost $30,000
Per ear.
per ear. So you've had one,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
you couldn't afford it, and you gave them the money.
Yes, I did. When the girls came along, Sarah is the best daughter-in-law in the world. And when this device became available, I'm not wealthy at all.
But we should say you cashed in your retirement to do
I
this.
cashed in a small retirement fund that I had.
Yeah. And it's not covered, your insurance does not cover this either. That's why you had to borrow the money.
Yeah.
I don't think that a family should struggle like this financially with something this important. So we have a little gift for you. Our friends at Envoy Medical Corporation, the company that actually supplied you with the original implant, will not only give you the next one for free, but they're going to give you $30,000 to pay you back.
This is worth it. And so you think that's the icing on the cake and it can't get any better than that, but it didn't end there. We came home, there were reporters showing up at my doorstep, the phone's ringing off the wall, they're calling my parents who live 30 minutes, an hour away, they're emailing me, they're getting hold of people I haven't talked to try to get a hold of me. It's not ending. And so Sloan and I sat down at the kitchen table one night, and we're pretty private people. We live off the grid. We're not in city limits. We live out on some land. Like I said, I've never been to the big city. I mean, we keep to ourselves. And Sloan especially has no desire to be in the spotlight. And so we sit down, and he's like, you know, it's apparent that there's going to be at least a couple more interviews. What are your feelings on this? What are your thoughts? And I was like, you know, my heart aches for the people who want this device but can't afford it. Insurance doesn't cover it. It's $30,000 per year. There are 36 million hard of hearing and deaf people in the U.S. alone. And if all 36 million of them want it, they so deserve it just as much as I do. So you know what? I'm going to blab from the rooftops every time I have an interview about how I want insurance companies to get on board. I want this device to start being covered, you know. And so he's like, all right, and then that'll be our goal from here on out. Anytime you have an interview request, I'm going to be your bulldog. I'll get on the phone and I'll tell him you'll do the interview, but you get to talk about this aspect of it. So that was kind of where we took it from there. And we think, okay, just a couple more interviews, you know. It didn't end there. The Doctor Show, Anderson Cooper, Fox News, Fox and Friends. I did several radio shows. I did magazine interviews. We've had film crews from Japan. We've had film crews from Korea, Canada. I can't even begin to explain the depths it's reached. What are you saying, babe? Yeah, and you know, we've done all these interviews, and I can't even remember half of them, to be honest with you. And it's just kept going and kept going and kept going. And you know, you think, okay, wow, it doesn't get any better than this. This platform I've been given, I'm like, I always joke and say I'm riding this train till it goes off the rail. And every time I think I'm at the end of the rail, something else pops up. So back in February of 2011, I was approached by a publishing company to write a book. They were like, you know, we think you've got a great story. This is a good opportunity to write a book. And so February, I started writing. I finished in August. I finished in September. It was published in November of 2012. Yeah. And so you think that's the end of the rail. It can't get any better than that. And here we are, you know, 1.5 years later, and I'm still getting phone calls. And I guess I should back up a little bit to say I ended up having the second device, the surgery done in January 2012, activated March 2012. So now I have both ears, and I realize how much better it is with both ears and not just one, which only furthered my desire to get insurance companies to cover it, because there were so many people that had, you know, like Larry had done, they had cashed out their savings just to get one ear. And I didn't dare have the heart to tell them, you want both, trust me, you are missing out. So, let me read over here. Yeah, and as this kept going, I would often tell people, I mean, there's still thousands and thousands of messages I haven't been able to read on YouTube. Between YouTube, Facebook, email, all these avenues, I was getting these emails and these messages from people who were just expressing how much they wish they could have the device, or how much my video had inspired them. Or, you know, there was a lady who lost her glasses on the way to work, and she messaged me and said, I was really having a crappy day, and then I saw your video and I thought, I have nothing to feel bad about. And then there was a man who had the terminal illness in Belgium, and he says, you know, I have bad days more often than not. And I see your video and I realize I still have something to be happy about. And it's still a hard concept for me to grasp, because for me, I just feel like the girl next door. You just happen to see 90 seconds of my life. I haven't done anything special, but it has touched so many and it has inspired so many. And so whether it was coincidence or whether I had something to do with it, within 6 months, it got picked up by insurance companies, and Blue Cross Blue Shield started picking it up in several states. At last count, I don't know how many. AT&T covers it door to door for their employees. The VA picked it up and started covering it. It's just gained snowball. I mean, it's just gained momentum. And it took the Cochlear 15 years to get picked up by insurance, and it took this device 6 months. And so, this has led to commercials with Audi, Jeep commercials, Wells Fargo commercials, all the TV shows, just opportunities to get to go and meet people and do things. I got to travel to Spain recently. I mean, every time you think it's done, something else pops up. So we just live our life. I groom dogs. I go to garage sales. I don't spend more than $10 on a pair of shoes. And then, whammo, I'm flown to Spain to go be on this TV show. And we're pinching pennies because we don't want to spend $100 on a meal. And we come home and go back to our routine. You know, you just never know what God has in store for you. And you just never know what He has promised, how He will carry it out in the most unconventional ways you've never dreamed of. And, the basis is the beauty of hope, to just holding on to what God has promised, or just holding on to what you can find to be positive and what you can be happy about in life. There's always something to be grateful for. No matter how down and out you are, there's always something to be grateful for. And a while back, before all this ever started, a lady at my church gave me a word about my ear, E-A-R, being in his heart, H-E-A-R-T. And so over the thing, I've just come to realize how something so simple as an ear was dear to his heart. So, everyone has something that they feel like is so small but means so much to you. And so there's just proof, not just me, but there's millions or thousands of people out there that have stories of things. You just got to look for it, and you just got to. Anyway, so here we are 3 years later, and God's still moving and still working. We still don't have jobs. He works part-time for the stagehand union. I groom dogs at home. I have my hands in many pots, a cell Sensi, a cell doTERRA. And I just look at it as, that's just God's unique way, because if we both had 9-to-5 jobs, there's no way we could jet off to Spain next week or go to Ricky Lake on Tuesday at 9. There's these little things that seem like they're negatives, but they're actually working towards a good thing. So that's pretty much it. I'm just here as a living, breathing testimony that God can do extraordinary things in extraordinary, unconventional ways. If you are obedient and if you serve Him and love Him regardless of every trial and tribulation of your life, He can do things you never dreamed of.
The people she has been talking about all evening need to come up here. So, Sloan and the girls.
I'm a speech therapist, and I'm really interested in hearing loss. And so I'm curious, after you were activated, what happened to your speech? Because your speech is amazing, and I know that you use primarily lip reading, but did your speech change after the activation?
Obviously to me, I didn't notice it as much as those around me, but Sloan said literally within 24 hours, he could tell improvements in the way I said things, my volume level, and things like that. And as far as speaking well, I get that often, and I've never found a good way to explain it without seeming arrogant, but the best way I can think of is, some people are really good at math. I am horrible at math. Some people have athletic ability and can play baseball. I can't run from here to that window without being out of breath. So I've always said, I guess just between my personality, just how I'm designed, I've always loved reading. I've always had a passion for English and grammar, and I've always worked really hard at it. Like I said, I was an only child, so my parents had all that time to devote with helping me. We constantly read books. They helped me. They worked with me. I was a nosy kid, and I think that's part of the reason I fell to the wayside with sign language, because this took too long. I wanted to jump in the conversation. I don't know, just all those things accumulated, but I have been told many times that I had great speech, and often people would say that I sounded like I had my tongue pierced and that I just had a little bit of a lisp. I don't honestly have a good answer, other than I do know that it has improved greatly. Many people have said your speech has improved greatly just since having the device turned on.
You didn't mention it. Was that the cochlear implant?
The cochlear implant I'm glad you asked, is mechanical. And so basically a cochlear implant is a better version of a hearing aid. So everything is mechanical. There's speakers, there's microphones, whereas this implant works with the natural components of your ear to give you natural hearing. So it's basically, those drivers are vibrating, and they're basically taking the place of the hairs that I don't have in my inner ear. So whereas this gives you natural hearing, whereas the cochlear is more mechanical, and kind of like a hearing aid raises the volume of everything. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to say to you that my daughter is a school teacher, and she has 2 children in one of her classes that has seen you on television, and the parents have been able to have the cochlear implants in them. So thank you for some good work.
Oh, thank you. I've had the opportunity to speak at some schools, and that's one of my favorite, because I don't feel as nervous around little kids. They're not going to notice if I mess up, but I love little kids. Yes,
Is
ma'am.
everyone eligible to have this surgery, or?
No, there are.
criterias.
I like to say it case-by-case basis. At the time when I had it done, they didn't have such standards set. But as time went on and more people had the device done, because at the time I was the youngest person to have it, and then I was only like one of 5 people in the U.S. to be duly implanted at the time. But after more and more people got it, because it was just recently FDA approved at the time that we heard about it and got it. It had just literally came on the market. And so as time went on and they did more surgeries, they realized that it's kind of more a case-by-case basis. Because whereas my hearing ranges in the severe to profound, another person who has severe to profound hearing may not be eligible. There's so many different levels and pitches that your hearing and everything works on. It's just a matter of having the testing done to see if you are a candidate.
You may have already answered this in a way, but my former roommate, whose name was Sarah, had a daughter who is grown, and she's had the cochlear implant. But if she's had that, can she have this surgery that you've had, or is that just once you've had that, you have to stick with that one?
My understanding is that a cochlear implant is not reversible. That may have since changed since I last had any information, but my understanding is that a cochlear cannot be reversed. So depending on whether she has them on both ears or not, because I do know that there are people who have a cochlear on one ear and then the Esteem implant on the other ear. The Esteem implant is supposedly, oh my goodness, sorry, supposedly reversible. They can reverse what they've done with this implant, which was another bonus for me. I was never a candidate, somebody may be wondering, I was never a candidate for the cochlear implant due to my type of hearing loss, and it's a different part of the ear that this focuses on. But that was a big plus for me, was the fact that this is reversible, because science and technology is constantly evolving and changing. And I know that they constantly update the cochlear devices and things like that.
Have you told Rush your story?
Not personally, no ma'am. But oddly enough, some of the higher ups in the company, the maker of the implant, I think they've golfed with him or hung out with him and knew him on a personal basis. So supposedly he knew of me, but I've never met him.
I was thinking about Rush Limbaugh, too. He had severe hearing loss, and that's the reason probably why he ran the ad that Sloan heard. I just find it interesting that God uses everything to bring glory to his name. I really appreciate your story. It's marvelous.
Thank you.
You mentioned severe to profound hearing loss. That's the interesting use of the word profound. You went from profound one way to profound the other.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's true. Good way to look at it.
Well, Sarah, thank you once again. It's been a marvelous story.
Thank you so much for having me.
We wish you the best. Remember that Sloan has the books back here, and please stop and purchase one. They're $14.95, and she will be glad to sign it for you.